The church bells tolled softly over the quiet Atlanta street, their sound mingling with the low rumble of engines. A long line of cars followed the hearse draped with the American flag. Inside the first limo, Sarah Owens clutched the folded uniform of her son, Marcus, a decorated Army sergeant who never made it home alive. Behind her, veterans in crisp dress blues walked solemnly, their medals catching the pale morning light. Neighbors stood silently on the sidewalks, holding small flags, some with hands over their hearts. It was a funeral, yes, but it was also an honor. Marcus Owens had given everything for his country. The procession moved toward the cemetery gates, a calm silence over the scene until it broke. Flashing red and blue lights cut across the road. A police cruiser screeched to a stop at the entrance. Officer Brent Walker stepped out, tall, pale, his mirrored sunglasses reflected the hearse. He adjusted his duty belt and stepped right into the middle of the road, raising a gloved hand. "Hold it right there," he barked. The hearse driver slowed to a crawl, unsure. The other cars behind it stopped abruptly. Confused murmurs rippled through the line. Sarah leaned out the limo window, her voice breaking. "Please, we're on our way to the cemetery." Walker ignored her. He walked deliberately toward the hearse, his boots crunching on the pavement. "This road's closed. You can't pass without clearance." The funeral director, an elderly man in a black suit, stepped forward, hands slightly raised. "Officer, this is a military funeral procession. We're on a scheduled route. The city approved this days ago." Walker's jaw tightened. "Not today, it isn't. Turn it around. You're not coming through here." A hush fell over the mourners. Veterans shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. One of them, a Marine in his 60s, stepped forward. "With all due respect, officer, this is a soldier's funeral. He served his country. Stand aside and let us honor him." Walker smirked. "Served his country? That's nice. But out here, I make the rules." Sarah gasped. Her trembling hands clutched the folded uniform tighter, tears streaking her face. "Please," she whispered. "This is my son." Walker didn't flinch. Instead, he gestured to his radio. "I'm calling for backup. If you don't disperse, I'll have this whole procession cited for blocking the road." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Phones began to rise. Neighbors, veterans, even passing drivers started recording. In the distance, a young boy holding a small flag whispered to his mother, "Why won't they let him be buried?" Sarah stepped out of the limo, her legs weak, but her voice steady despite the pain. "He fought for this country. He died for this country, and you won't even let him rest?" Walker's smirk grew colder. "Ma'am, I don't care who he was. Turn around." But what Walker didn't notice, what he couldn't see behind those mirrored sunglasses, was the small black camera clipped to the front of the hearse. It was streaming live. Thousands online were already watching. And as the crowd outside the cemetery gates grew restless, the livestream's viewer count ticked past 10,000. Far away, in a quiet Oval Office, an aide rushed in holding a tablet. "Mr. President, you need to see this." Within minutes, the live stream from the hearse spread across social media. At first, it was just a few local viewers, curious about why a military funeral procession had been stopped. But the image of Officer Walker standing arrogantly in the middle of the road, hand on his holster, blocking a flag-draped coffin, was powerful enough to ignite anger far beyond the street. "Is this real?" one viewer commented. "Who stops a soldier's funeral?" another typed furiously. In the limo behind the hearse, Sarah Owens sat frozen. Her son's burial was supposed to be sacred, the one peaceful moment after months of grief. Now it had turned into something ugly and public. The funeral director tried again. "Officer, this is highly irregular. We have all the permits. Please let us through before this escalates." Walker scoffed. "Escalates? I'm enforcing the law. This road is off limits today. I don't care what paper you have." A young veteran stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "With respect, officer, you're crossing a line. We buried brothers in combat zones with more dignity than this. Let us pass." Walker's sunglasses hid his eyes, but his smirk was visible. "Back in line, hero. I don't answer to you." Phones recorded every word. Someone in the crowd live-streamed on a larger platform, tagging veteran groups, news outlets, and military organizations. Viewer counts jumped, 20,000, 30,000, climbing by the second. From the crowd, an elderly man in a wheelchair, wearing an old army cap, called out, "That boy in that coffin fought for your freedom to wear that badge. Show some respect." But Walker didn't move. He stepped closer to the hearse, tapping the hood with his gloved hand. "Turn it around. Last warning." Sarah stumbled out of the limo holding her son's folded uniform. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice, though shaking, carried strength. "He was my son, Sergeant Marcus Owens. He fought in Afghanistan. He saved lives, and now he's gone. Haven't we lost enough?" Walker sneered. "Your son's past doesn't give you special treatment." A collective gasp swept through the mourners. From the back of the crowd, a woman shouted, "What's your badge number?" Another voice, "We're live, the whole country's watching you." Indeed they were. On a tablet in a newsroom downtown, a producer's eyes widened. "Put this on air, now!" Moments later, a major news channel cut to the live stream. The anchor's voice was urgent. "We interrupt this broadcast with breaking footage. A black soldier's funeral procession being stopped by a police officer in Atlanta. Viewer discretion advised." Back at the cemetery gates, the tension grew thicker. Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder in silent defiance. A few stepped closer, forming a human line between the officer and the hearse. Walker's radio crackled. "Unit 7, we're getting calls about your location. What's going on?" He pressed the button. "Just doing my job, there's no problem here." But there was. In a nearby federal building, a staffer knocked urgently on the door of a senior official. "Sir, the president's social media team just flagged this. He wants a briefing." At the same time, in the crowd, Malik Turner, a young local journalist, began narrating live. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing something disgraceful. A grieving mother can't bury her son because an officer has decided to block the funeral. We are live on multiple platforms. Keep sharing this. Let the world see." The viewer count surged past 50,000. And then slowly something shifted. From the back of the crowd, more cars arrived. Veterans, community leaders, ordinary citizens who had seen the stream and rushed to support the family. They stepped onto the street, their presence forming a wall of people. "Let them through!" someone shouted. Walker's smirk faltered for just a second as he glanced around. The crowd was growing. Phones were everywhere. The radio on his shoulder crackled again, more insistent this time. "Unit 7, command wants an update now. You're trending on live news." He didn't answer. Inside the limo, Sarah gripped her son's uniform and whispered, "Marcus, I'm so sorry." And far away in the White House, an aide handed the president a tablet with the live footage. He watched for a moment, his expression darkening. "Get me the Atlanta police chief," the president said. "Now." The air outside the cemetery gates grew heavy with tension. What had started as a small, solemn funeral procession was now a scene flooded with people, neighbors, strangers, and veterans arriving after seeing the live stream. Phones were raised everywhere, capturing every second. Officer Walker stood rigid in the road, trying to maintain control. His sunglasses reflected the swelling crowd, but for the first time, doubt flickered behind his posture. The elderly Marine who had spoken earlier stepped closer, his medals glinting faintly. "Son, you're out of line. Step aside and let this mother bury her boy." Walker gripped his radio, his voice clipped. "Dispatch, send another unit. Crowd's growing." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Unit 7, you need to clear this now. The chief is calling in." Walker hesitated, glancing at the hearse. He muttered, "I'm handling it." Sarah Owens stood beside the limo, clutching her son's folded uniform. The look in her eyes was no longer just grief, it was disbelief. She whispered, half to herself, "Is this what his sacrifice meant? To be stopped here? Like this?" The live stream chat exploded with outrage. "This is disgusting! Someone call the governor! Tag every news outlet now!" Inside a newsroom downtown, anchors interrupted regular programming. "We have live footage of a shocking scene. Atlanta police blocking the funeral procession of Army Sergeant Marcus Owens. Thousands are already watching this unfold in real time." Back at the gates, Malik Turner, the young journalist streaming on his phone, raised his voice. "Everyone watching, keep sharing. This officer is stopping a funeral, a soldier's funeral. Look at this mother. Look at these veterans." The crowd started chanting softly at first. "Let them through, let them through." Veterans formed a protective line in front of the hearse. Some saluted silently, their faces carved with quiet rage. A woman stepped out of the crowd holding a framed photo of Marcus in uniform, medals pinned proudly to his chest. "This is who you're blocking," she said firmly, holding the photo high for everyone to see. Walker's smirk faltered. For a split second, his hand twitched at his belt, uncertain if this was still about authority or something far beyond him. Then another car arrived. Not just any car, a black SUV with tinted windows. The crowd shifted as the door opened and a man in a sharply pressed suit stepped out. It was Colonel James Parker, Marcus Owens' former commanding officer. He walked toward the hearse with purposeful steps, the weight of his authority following him like a shadow. "Officer," Parker said, his tone calm but razor-sharp, "step aside, now." Walker didn't move. "This road is restricted. I don't care who you are." Parker's eyes narrowed. "I'm the man who presented Marcus Owens his last commendation, and I won't stand here and let you dishonor his memory. You're embarrassing this city and yourself." The crowd roared in agreement. More chants. "Let them through! Let them through!" Walker's radio crackled again, louder this time. "Unit 7, the chief is on the line. Put him through now." Walker reluctantly pressed the receiver. "This is Walker." The chief's voice was sharp, furious. "Brent, what the hell are you doing? You're live on every national network. Move your car and clear the way. Now!" Walker hesitated, looking at the cameras, the veterans, the growing outrage. "Chief, I was just— Don't talk, just move. The mayor's office is calling. Do you want this to reach Washington?" But it already had. Inside the White House, the president was on a secure call with the Atlanta police chief. His voice was calm but carried the weight of command. "I'm watching this live. Fix it immediately, or I'll fix it for you." Back at the cemetery gate, Sarah Owens fell to her knees beside the hearse, whispering to the flag-draped coffin, "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I didn't think even this moment could be stolen from you." The veterans around her tightened their line, shielding her from the cameras. The chief's voice came again through Walker's radio. "Brent, this is an order. Step aside, let them through, or hand over your badge right now." The crowd grew louder, sensing a shift. Cameras zoomed in on Walker, his jaw clenched, and then, finally, he stepped back. The hearse slowly began moving forward again, the crowd parting to let it through. Cheers mixed with tears as the veterans saluted, the chants fading into quiet sobs. But Walker didn't walk away. He stood frozen, realizing the damage was done. Far away in the White House Situation Room, the president turned to his aide. "Get me the full report on this officer," he said, "and arrange a call with Marcus Owens' family after the burial." The Livestream viewer count hit 200,000, and now the entire country was watching. The hearse rolled slowly past Officer Walker, the flag draped across Marcus Owens' coffin glinting faintly in the soft sunlight. The crowd watched in silence as it crossed the threshold into the cemetery. Some mourners wept openly. Others simply stood frozen, processing what had just unfolded. Sarah Owens remained kneeling beside the limo, clutching her son's uniform. Colonel Parker gently helped her to her feet. "It's over now," he said quietly. "He's going to rest where he belongs." But the tension in the air hadn't lifted completely. Phones were still raised, still recording. The crowd wasn't finished watching Walker. As the officer stood in the middle of the street, motionless, his radio crackled again. This time it wasn't the chief. "Unit 7, hold for a priority call." Walker frowned, pressing the receiver. "This is Walker." There was a brief pause, then a new voice came through. Deep, calm, but commanding. "Officer Walker, this is President Harris." Walker froze. "Excuse me?" The voice repeated, sharper. "This is the President of the United States. I'm calling you directly." The crowd, though they couldn't hear the radio, noticed Walker's sudden stillness. A ripple of murmurs moved through the people closest to him. "You've disgraced this soldier's memory," the president's voice continued. "You've disgraced his family, his community, and the uniform you wear. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Walker swallowed hard, his usual smugness faltering. "Mr. President, I was just following—" "Don't you dare say you were following protocol," the president interrupted. "There is no protocol that stops a funeral, not for anyone, and certainly not for someone who gave their life for this country." Walker's hand trembled slightly on the radio. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. The president's voice didn't rise, but it carried an undeniable weight. "You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. The Atlanta police chief has your badge and weapon waiting for you at the precinct. After this call, you will remove yourself from that scene. Do you understand?" Walker glanced around. The veterans, the family, the cameras. For the first time, he saw no power left in his badge. "Yes, Mr. President," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Good," the president said. "Now step aside and let this family grieve in peace." The radio went silent. Walker slowly lowered his hand. The crowd, sensing something had shifted, fell into a strange, expectant quiet. Then Colonel Parker stepped toward him, his gaze piercing. "It's over," he said firmly. Walk away." And this time, Walker did. He turned without a word, heading back toward his cruiser. The crowd erupted, not in cheers but in a chorus of voices demanding accountability. "Justice for Marcus! Remove him from the force! No more silence!" Inside the cemetery, the soldiers lifted Marcus's coffin from the hearse. They moved in precise formation, every step deliberate and reverent. Sarah followed behind, holding the folded flag close to her chest, her grief tempered only by the dignity of the moment returning at last. The live stream continued, showing both scenes, the burial beginning inside the gates and the crowd outside documenting Walker's retreat. Viewers watched in stunned silence as the hashtag #HonorMarcusOwens began trending nationwide. Inside a nearby newsroom, an anchor removed his earpiece. "We just got confirmation," he said, looking into the camera. "The president himself called the officer blocking Sergeant Owens's funeral and ordered him removed from duty. Federal authorities are now reviewing the incident." Back in the White House, President Harris sat at his desk, phone still in hand. He turned to his aide. "Get me the Owens family after the ceremony. They deserve more than just words, and make sure this department understands. We'll be watching." Meanwhile, in a tall conference room at the Atlanta Police Department, the chief slammed a stack of papers onto the table. "He just put a stain on all of us. Every officer here will feel the backlash because of his arrogance." Another officer spoke softly. "Sir, this isn't just about Walker. People are saying he's not the only one who's done things like this." The chief closed his eyes. He knew they were right. At the cemetery, the final notes of taps echoed through the air as Marcus Owens was laid to rest. Sarah kissed the coffin gently before the soldiers lowered it into the ground. Tears streamed silently down her face, but there was a faint sense of peace now. Beside her, Colonel Parker saluted one last time. "Rest easy, Sergeant. We'll make sure they remember." And outside the gates, the crowd held their candles high as dusk began to fall. It was no longer just a funeral. It was a statement. The cameras didn't stop rolling. Neither did the calls for change, because one act of disrespect had revealed a deeper truth the world could no longer ignore. By the time Marcus Owens' coffin was lowered into the ground, the story had already circled the globe. Major networks replayed the live stream footage on a loop. Walker blocking the hearse, Sarah Owens begging to bury her son, and finally the shocking moment the president himself ordered Walker to stand down. Outside the cemetery, reporters swarmed the mourners as they exited. Malik Turner, the young journalist who first streamed the confrontation, was surrounded by cameras. "I just did what anyone with a phone would do," he said humbly. "But this isn't just about one bad cop. It's about what families like the Owens go through every day: disrespect, distrust, and silence." Sarah, flanked by Colonel Parker and Keisha, walked slowly toward the waiting car. A reporter called out gently, "Mrs. Owens, do you have a message for the country?" She stopped, still clutching the folded flag. Her voice was quiet but resolute. "My son gave everything for this country. All I wanted was to lay him to rest with dignity. If this is how they treat a soldier, how do they treat the ones no one knows?" Her words went viral within minutes. Meanwhile, at the Atlanta Police Department, chaos was brewing. The chief held a tense press conference. "Effective immediately, Officer Brent Walker has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. We extend our deepest apologies to the Owens family for this unacceptable incident." Reporters shouted questions. "Chief, was this truly an isolated incident? How many complaints were filed against Officer Walker before today? Will there be an independent review of the department?" The chief dodged, but the cracks were showing. Inside the building, officers whispered in hallways, exchanging uneasy glances. At City Hall, the mayor convened an emergency meeting. "We're in damage control," she told her staff. "The president is watching. Federal officials are circling. We can't afford another mistake." Back at Walker's small apartment, the disgraced officer stared at his phone. Messages flooded his inbox, some from supporters, but far more were threats. News vans parked outside his complex. He shut his blinds, muttering to himself. "They made me the villain," he said quietly, gripping a glass of whiskey. "They don't know what it's really like out there." But even he couldn't deny the public fury building outside. That evening, the president called Sarah Owens. The conversation was brief but heartfelt. "Mrs. Owens," the president said, his voice solemn, "I watched what happened today. I want you to know that your son's sacrifice will be honored. He deserved better. You deserved better. I will personally ensure this does not go unanswered." Sarah's voice trembled. "Thank you, Mr. President. I just want no one else to feel this pain." After the call, the White House released a statement. The events surrounding Sergeant Marcus Owens' funeral are unacceptable. The Department of Justice will review the incident as part of a broader evaluation of local law enforcement practices. That single sentence sent shockwaves through the media. Analysts debated what it meant. Was it just a symbolic review or the start of something much larger? Meanwhile, in a quiet suburban home, Henry Cole, the retired officer who had exposed corruption in another city, watched the news coverage carefully. He recognized the look on the chief's face during the press conference. It was the same look he'd seen when higher-ups tried to bury misconduct years ago. "This isn't the first time," Cole muttered. He reached for an old folder in his drawer, filled with names and incidents long ignored. Maybe it was time to speak again. Across the city, Malik edited his footage into a clean timeline, preparing to release a documentary-style piece online. "This isn't over," he told his team. "People need to know the full story, not just the viral clip." As night fell, the cemetery was quiet again. Sarah returned one last time, standing by Marcus's grave as the moonlight illuminated the fresh soil. Colonel Parker joined her silently, placing a single medal on the headstone. "He would have wanted peace," Parker said. Sarah nodded. "Then we'll fight for it." For him. But beyond the cemetery walls, protests had already begun. Crowds gathered outside the police department holding candles and signs. "Honor Marcus. Reform now." In Washington, Evelyn Ross from the DOJ prepared a preliminary report for the president. "If we step in," she told her team, "we're not just reviewing one officer, we're pulling back the curtain on an entire culture." Back in his apartment, Walker's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. A calm, unfamiliar voice spoke. "You're not the only one they'll blame. Think carefully before you talk." Walker's hand trembled as the line went dead. He realized he wasn't just disgraced, he was expendable. And somewhere in a newsroom, a new headline was being written. "Funeral incident sparks nationwide, demands for police accountability." Because what began as one moment of cruelty was becoming a national movement. By morning, Atlanta was awake to a new reality. News channels replayed the clip of Sarah Owens begging to bury her son, Colonel Parker confronting Officer Walker, and the president's voice cutting through the radio. Every word was dissected, every frame analyzed. Outside the Atlanta Police Department, hundreds gathered with candles and signs. Veterans in uniform stood alongside community leaders and families. The chants echoed off the downtown buildings. "Honor Marcus, reform now! No justice, no peace!" Sarah watched the coverage from her living room. She sat quietly on the couch, still holding Marcus's folded uniform. Keisha sat beside her, squeezing her hand. "They're saying his name all over the country now," Keisha whispered. Sarah's eyes welled with fresh tears. "He wanted to make a difference. I never thought it would happen like this." Across town, at a bustling newsroom, Malik Turner finished editing his in-depth report. His voice narrated over clips of the funeral. Marcus Owens fought for his country, but his final journey home was met with disrespect. What happened on that road was not just an insult to one family. It was a reflection of something deeper. And the question now is, how many more have faced this in silence? The video went live and within an hour racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in. "This isn't just Atlanta, it happens everywhere. We need accountability, not excuses." Meanwhile, at the Atlanta Police Department, Chief Reynolds sat with his senior staff. The mood was grim. "The DOJ is officially involved," Reynolds said flatly. "They'll review Walker's actions and every similar complaint in the last decade. We're exposed." A deputy chief shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, Walker wasn't the only one. There are others with histories that won't look good under federal eyes." Reynolds closed his eyes briefly. "I know, but they'll expect a scapegoat, and Walker already handed himself over. For now, we contain the damage." But even as he spoke, the department's inbox filled with Freedom of Information Act requests from journalists. The wall of silence was already cracking. At Walker's apartment, the disgraced officer hadn't slept. The blinds were drawn, the TV muted. He scrolled through social media in disbelief, his face plastered on every channel, his name trending as a national disgrace. His phone buzzed again, another unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the line was calm, deliberate. "Walker, don't forget who protected you all these years. Keep your mouth shut about internal matters, and you might still have a future when this blows over. Start talking, and you won't make it that far." The line went dead. Walker stared at the phone, his hands trembling. For the first time, he understood just how deep the system ran. Elsewhere, Henry Cole watched the events unfold on his TV. The retired officer shook his head slowly. He knew the pattern too well. "They'll throw Walker under the bus," he muttered. "But the machine stays the same." He opened his old folder again, flipping through his saved emails and memos. He'd warned about officers like Walker years ago. Nobody listened. But maybe now, with the country watching, it was time to speak up. Later that day, the president held a televised press briefing. He stood at the podium, flanked by the Secretary of Defense and the Attorney General. "What happened in Atlanta was unacceptable," the president said firmly. "We owe every fallen soldier and their families respect, not obstacles. I have directed the Department of Justice to conduct a full civil rights review of this incident and the practices of the Atlanta Police Department. And let me be clear, this is only the beginning. No one is above accountability." The crowd at the press conference applauded. Across the nation, veteran organizations issued statements of support. Colonel Parker, sitting in his office at Fort Benning, watched the speech with quiet resolve. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Vanessa Brooks? This is Colonel Parker. I want to help. I can testify to Marcus's service record, and I'll stand with the Owens family in any inquiry. They won't do this alone." Vanessa, the attorney who had worked on similar cases, paused before answering. "Thank you, Colonel. We're going to need every voice we can get. This isn't just about one funeral. It's about making sure this never happens again." That evening, a massive vigil formed outside the state capitol. Thousands gathered with candles, holding signs with Marcus's name and photo. Sarah Owens, still in mourning clothes, was invited to speak. She stood on the steps, her voice quiet but carrying through the crowd. "My son believed in this country," she said. "He gave everything for it. And in his final moment, he was treated like he didn't matter. I'm here to say he did matter. They all matter." The crowd erupted in applause, chants echoing into the night. Meanwhile, in a darkened office, a group of men watched the news silently. One of them, older and well-dressed, spoke at last. "If this keeps growing, it won't stop with Walker. It'll reach all of us." Another replied coldly, "Then we make sure it doesn't grow." Outside, the chants continued, and the movement gained strength, because one act of disrespect had become a spark for a fire that couldn't be ignored. The next morning, Atlanta awoke to walls plastered with headlines. "Funeral outrage sparks nationwide protests." "President orders federal review of police practices." "Who really protected Officer Walker?" The city's streets were filled with murmurs and camera crews. Outside the Atlanta Police Department, the crowd had doubled overnight. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with community members, holding photos of Marcus Owens. Some held signs that read, "Respect our heroes," and "Accountability now." Inside the department, Chief Reynolds sat in a tense meeting with city officials and attorneys. A large screen displayed the president's press conference from the night before. "We're out of time," one city attorney said, pacing. "The DOJ isn't just reviewing Walker. They're requesting access to all internal misconduct records from the last decade." Reynolds rubbed his forehead. "They'll find more. We all know it." Another deputy chief spoke cautiously. "If we cooperate fully, it might soften the blow. But if we fight it, it'll look like a cover-up." Reynolds exhaled heavily. "We can't fight what's already out. Start gathering the files, and be ready for resignations." Meanwhile, in his small apartment, Walker stared at the muted news broadcast. His name was everywhere. His photo, frozen mid-smirk at the funeral, had become a symbol of everything wrong with policing. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He answered, his voice rough. "What do you want?" The voice was calm, almost detached. "You've made enough noise. Keep your mouth shut. If you talk about anyone else, you'll regret it. Remember who kept you safe all these years." Walker's throat tightened. He ended the call and sat silently, realizing he was now completely alone. Across town, Henry Cole stared at his stack of saved documents. He had seen this play before, the sacrificial lamb thrown to the wolves while the real players stayed hidden. Cole picked up the phone and called Vanessa Brooks. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice gravelly but firm, "I'm ready to talk. I have records from my years on the force, emails, directives, names. They protected men like Walker. They told us to look away. It's time the world saw it." Vanessa's voice was steady. "Mr. Cole, if you testify, it won't just expose Walker. It will pull the whole system into the light. Are you prepared for that?" Cole hesitated for a moment. "I stayed silent too long. I owe it to Marcus Owens and every other family they disrespected. I'm prepared. Later that day, Malik Turner released a follow-up report online. His narration rolled over footage of the protests and Sarah Owens speaking at the vigil. This isn't just about one officer. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked. Families like the Owens deserve better. Communities deserve better. And now, with the country watching, the truth might finally come out. The video went viral instantly. Commentators on national TV debated what would happen next. In Washington, DOJ prosecutor Evelyn Ross reviewed Malik's footage. "We're moving forward," she told her team. "If Cole's evidence is legitimate, we'll launch a full-scale federal investigation into the Atlanta Police Department. We'll make it clear, this isn't just about optics, it's about justice." That evening, Sarah Owens received an unexpected visit. Colonel Parker stood at her doorstep with a woman in a Navy suit, Evelyn Ross. "Mrs. Owens," Evelyn said gently, "I wanted to come in person. We're here to make sure your son's story is the last of its kind. We'll need your permission to use Marcus's case as part of a federal inquiry. Will you help us?" Sarah looked down at the folded flag in her hands, then back at Evelyn. "If it means no other mother has to feel what I felt, then yes, I'll help you." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you. You've already started a movement. Now we'll make it into change." Outside the protests grew. Candles lit the streets as people sang softly, their voices blending into a powerful, haunting chorus. But in a shadowed office somewhere in the city, a group of men met quietly. One of them slammed a folder on the table. "If Cole testifies, it won't just take down the department, it'll lead straight to us." Another man leaned forward. "Then we make sure Cole doesn't make it to that courtroom." And as the chants for justice echoed through the night, the silent war to keep the truth buried had already begun. Because the more light shines on the truth, the more desperate the darkness becomes. The next day, the city was buzzing with whispers of new revelations. News anchors hinted at a potential whistleblower who was prepared to expose decades of corruption inside the Atlanta Police Department. In his modest apartment, Henry Cole sat at his kitchen table, staring at the stack of files that had gathered dust for years. Each paper was a fragment of the truth. Ignored complaints, falsified reports, emails from high-ranking officials instructing officers to handle things quietly. Vanessa Brooks arrived with a small security team. She set her briefcase on the table and looked Cole in the eye. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They'll come after you and they won't be subtle about it." Cole's weathered face didn't flinch. "I spent years looking the other way. I can't live with it anymore." Marcus Owens deserved better. They all did. Vanessa nodded. "Then let's get you to a safe location. We'll arrange your testimony with federal protection." Meanwhile, at the Atlanta Police Department, Chief Reynolds was on a tense call with city officials. "We have credible reports that Cole is meeting with DOJ attorneys," an aide said. "If he testifies, they'll have a paper trail leading back to multiple administrations. It won't stop with Walker." Reynolds gritted his teeth. "Do we know what he has?" "Enough to burn the department down," the aide replied grimly. Across town, Officer Walker sat in his dimly lit apartment, watching the news cycle replay his downfall over and over. His phone buzzed yet again, this time with a simple text message. "Cole is about to ruin everything. If he talks, you go down harder. Stop him." Walker stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He realized he was no longer just a disgraced cop. He was a liability to the same people who once protected him. That evening, DOJ prosecutor Evelyn Ross held a private meeting with Vanessa. "We'll put Cole in protective custody tonight," Evelyn said. "He'll testify at the preliminary federal hearing in 2 days. Once his documents are public, it'll be impossible for them to silence him." Vanessa exhaled. "Do you trust local law enforcement to help with security?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not a chance. We're bringing in federal marshals." Meanwhile, Malik Turner uploaded another explosive report. His footage showed veterans and civilians gathering in record numbers outside the state capitol, demanding reform. His voice narrated over the crowd. "This movement isn't slowing down. What started with one soldier's funeral is now exposing something much bigger, and soon the people who buried the truth will face it themselves." As the protests grew, Sarah Owens watched quietly from her porch. She could hear the distant chants carried on the night breeze. Keisha sat beside her, holding her hand. "You didn't just bury your son," Keisha whispered. "You woke up a city." Sarah nodded faintly. "I just hope it's enough." Across the city, in a shadowed office, the same group of men who had been quietly watching everything sat around a polished table. "We can't allow Cole to testify," one said coldly. "If those documents are released, the entire network collapses. This goes beyond the department. It'll reach city contracts, private deals, donors, everything." Another man leaned forward. "Then we act now, tonight." They didn't need to say more. Later that night, Cole packed the last of his files into a secure case. Vanessa's team waited outside to escort him to a safe house. He paused for a moment, looking around his small apartment one last time. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. "You won't make it to the courthouse." Cole's hands trembled slightly. He quickly grabbed his jacket and opened the door, only to freeze. Across the street, a dark SUV sat idling, its headlights off. One of Vanessa's security team noticed it too. "We need to move, now." They hustled Cole into a waiting car. The SUV's engine roared to life, pulling into traffic behind them. Inside the car, Cole's voice was shaky. "They know. They're coming." "Don't worry," the guard said firmly. "They won't get to you. Not tonight." But as the convoy turned down a narrow side street, another vehicle appeared, blocking the road. "Brace yourselves," the driver shouted. Cole clutched the briefcase tighter. For the first time, he wondered if he'd made a mistake by stepping out of the shadows. Meanwhile, in the DOJ office, Evelyn Ross got a text from her contact in the field. "Cole is in transit, but we're being followed." She stood up immediately, her face pale. "We can't lose him. If they stop him tonight, the truth dies with him." Across the city, the crowd outside the Capitol kept chanting, unaware that the man who could blow the case open was fighting just to survive the night. And back in the White House, the president received another update. He looked at his aide with a steely gaze. "Make sure Cole makes it, whatever it takes." Because the closer the truth came to light, the more dangerous the darkness became. The narrow side street echoed with the roar of engines. Cole sat in the back seat of the black sedan, clutching the briefcase like it was his last lifeline. Vanessa's security driver swerved sharply, trying to avoid the SUV that had pulled out in front of them, blocking the road. "Hold on!" the driver barked, slamming the brakes just in time. Behind them, the other dark SUV that had been tailing accelerated, trapping them between two vehicles. In the side mirror, masked figures stepped out, moving deliberately toward their car. Cole's breathing grew shallow. "They're going to kill me," he whispered. "Not on my watch," the guard in the passenger seat said, pulling his weapon. He opened the door slightly, aiming it toward the approaching figures. "Stay inside," the driver shouted. "I'm getting us out." With a sudden jolt, the sedan reversed hard, spinning into a tight three-point turn. Tires screeched. The back bumper clipped a trash bin, sending it flying, but they gained a few seconds of distance. The tailing SUV gunned its engine, following close behind. In the DOJ command room miles away, Evelyn Ross listened to frantic updates over the secure line. "They're under pursuit," the field agent reported. "2 vehicles, no plates, armed individuals. We need immediate backup." "Send the marshals," Evelyn ordered. "They cannot lose him." Back on the street, the security driver made a hard left onto a larger road. Horns blared as they cut through traffic, but the second SUV was relentless. It rammed the rear bumper, jolting everyone inside. "Brace!" the guard shouted. Cole clutched the briefcase tighter, his mind flashing with regret. "I should have stayed quiet," he muttered, his voice shaking. "No," Vanessa's driver said firmly, eyes locked on the road. "You did the right thing. We just have to survive the night." The convoy sped toward the freeway entrance, weaving through cars. A drone of sirens in the distance signaled that someone had called 911, but help felt too far away. Meanwhile, in a nearby surveillance van, 2 men listened to the chase through an intercepted radio feed. "They won't make it to the courthouse," one said calmly. "Our people are handling it." But their confidence wavered when a sudden noise cut through the feed. Federal marshals' vehicles entering the chase. "Marshals inbound," the other man warned. On the freeway, blue lights flared in the distance. 2 armored SUVs merged into the lane, positioning themselves between Cole's car and the pursuers. The marshal's loudspeaker boomed, "Pull over immediately! Federal agents are taking over this convoy!" The masked men in the pursuing SUV hesitated. One of them barked an order, and the vehicle abruptly veered off an exit ramp, disappearing into the night. The car that had blocked the road earlier sped away in the opposite direction. Within seconds they vanished, leaving only the echo of screeching tires behind. Cole slumped back in his seat, his face pale. "They were going to kill me. They were really going to do it." The lead marshal pulled alongside their sedan, gesturing firmly. "Follow us. We're taking you to a secure federal facility. Evelyn Ross received the update minutes later. She exhaled sharply, finally allowing herself to breathe. Good. Keep him locked down tight. Tomorrow, we put him in front of the cameras. Across the city, news of the attempted interception leaked online. Malik Turner broke the story on his feed. Sources say Henry Cole, a retired officer preparing to testify against APD, was targeted tonight. Federal marshals intervened in a high-speed pursuit. He is safe for now. The public's reaction was immediate. They're trying to silence him. This goes way deeper than one officer. Protect Cole at all costs. Outside the state capitol, protesters held up new signs. Let the truth speak, and we're watching. Meanwhile, at a dimly lit private club, the men who had ordered the hit sat silently. One of them tapped ash from his cigar into a tray. Cole survived, the younger one said nervously. The marshals got to him first. The older man leaned back, unfazed. It doesn't matter. If he testifies, we'll discredit him. Old, bitter, unreliable. We've done it before. But even he knew the ground was shifting. Back in the safe house, Cole sat on the edge of a cot, still shaking. Vanessa stood across from him, her voice calm but steady. Tomorrow, you'll testify. You'll tell the truth and they won't be able to bury it anymore. Cole looked at her, his eyes heavy but resolute. I'm tired of burying my conscience. Marcus Owens deserves this. So does every name on those reports. Outside, the federal agents secured the perimeter. The city was quiet for now, but the storm was far from over. At the White House, the president received the latest briefing. His face hardened. This isn't just Atlanta anymore. Prepare the National Task Force. It's time we dig deeper. And in the distance, church bells rang again, echoing the same ones that told for Marcus Owens. Because the truth had barely survived the night, but its voice was now louder than ever. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by barricades and federal agents. Crowds gathered outside, chanting and holding signs that now bore not just Marcus Owens' name, but also Henry Cole's. The whispers of a larger conspiracy had spread overnight, and everyone wanted to know what Cole would reveal. Inside the courthouse, Vanessa Brooks escorted Cole through a private entrance. He clutched the same briefcase that had nearly cost him his life the night before. His face was pale but resolute. Federal marshals stayed close, scanning every corner. Are you ready? Vanessa asked softly. Cole nodded. I've been ready for years. I just didn't know it until now. In the courtroom, reporters filled the back rows. Kincaid sat at the defense table, looking hollow and defeated. Dalton Briggs leaned toward him. If Cole gets through this, you're done. And so are a lot of other people. Kincaid stared at the polished wood in front of him. He muttered under his breath, maybe they deserve it. Judge Harriet Monroe entered, her gavel striking the bench. Court is in session. The state may call its next witness. Monique Harris stood. The prosecution calls Henry Cole. The room fell silent. Cole walked slowly to the stand, the weight of every eye pressing on him. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Monique began gently. Mr. Cole, can you tell the court your former position? I was a police officer with the Atlanta Police Department for 23 years, Cole said clearly. I retired 5 years ago. And why have you decided to testify today? Cole looked directly at the jury. Because what happened to Sergeant Marcus Owens wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lone bad cop having a bad day. It was the result of a system that protects people like Officer Walker. I saw it, I was told to ignore it, and I can't stay silent anymore. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Monique handed him a folder. What are these documents? Cole opened it, revealing printed emails and memos. These are internal communications from supervisors and commanders. They show how complaints against certain officers, including Walker, were erased or marked inconclusive. It was policy. If an officer caused trouble, we were told to handle it quietly. On the large screen behind them, projected emails displayed damning lines. Don't escalate this. Too much attention already. Officer Walker is valuable. File this under training issue and close it. The jury stared at the screen, some with visible shock. Cole continued, his voice stronger now. This wasn't about protecting the public, it was about protecting the badge. I watched good officers get pushed out for speaking up, while bad ones were shielded, and Marcus Owens paid the price for it. Briggs immediately stood. Objection. This is painting the entire department with one brush. Judge Monroe shook her head. Overruled. The witness will continue. Cole leaned closer to the microphone. There's a list of at least 15 officers with histories just like Walker's, complaints buried, Victims ignored. It's not an accident, it's a culture, and it goes higher than you think. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Outside the courthouse, the crowd watched the live feed on giant screens. When Cole's words were broadcast, chants erupted. "We believe Cole! We believe Cole!" Malik Turner streamed the moment live, his voice echoing over the footage. "This is it! This is the testimony that's going to crack the wall!" Inside, Monique asked, "Mr. Cole, why didn't you speak sooner?" Cole's eyes softened with regret. "Because I was afraid. Because I believed the lie that the system would fix itself. I was wrong, and I won't let Marcus Owens' memory be another name swept under a rug." He held up the final document, a memo with multiple signatures. "This is the approval for Walker's last inconclusive investigation. It was signed by commanders, union reps, even city officials." Dalton Briggs shot to his feet again. "Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of this trial." Judge Monroe's gavel slammed. "Sit down, Mr. Briggs. The evidence is admissible." Kincaid lowered his head, realizing this wasn't just about him anymore. Back in Washington, DOJ prosecutor Evelyn Ross watched the live stream from her office. She turned to her team. "That's it. We have enough. Initiate the federal investigation. Full scope. No one walks away from this clean." The crowd outside the courthouse exploded into cheers as Cole stepped down from the stand. Vanessa met him with a firm nod. "You just changed everything," she whispered. Sarah Owens, sitting quietly in the gallery, wiped a tear. For the first time since Marcus's death, she felt a glimmer of hope that his story might lead to something bigger than pain. But in a dark office across town, the men who once controlled the network of silence sat in panic. "They can't contain this now," one said. Another replied coldly, "Then we burn what's left before it burns us." And outside, the chants grew louder, echoing through the streets and beyond the city. Because the truth was no longer a whisper, it was a roar shaking the foundation of power itself. By midday, Cole's testimony dominated every screen in the country. Clips of his words, "It's not an accident, it's a culture," ran nonstop on news channels. Social media feeds overflowed with side-by-side images of Marcus Owens in uniform and the damning memos that Cole had revealed. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had tripled. Veterans saluted as Sarah Owens stood quietly among them, holding the folded flag that once draped her son's coffin. The chants had evolved. "Not one more! Tear down the silence!" Inside the Atlanta Police Department, panic set in. Officers whispered nervously in hallways. Old complaints were being pulled from archives. Files that had been marked resolved or closed were suddenly under federal lock. Chief Reynolds sat in his office with 2 city lawyers. His phone buzzed every few minutes, calls from the mayor, the governor, and now even federal agents demanding meetings. "We're bleeding credibility," one lawyer said bluntly. "Cole just handed them enough to justify a federal takeover of the department." Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Who else is exposed?" The lawyer hesitated. "Anyone who signed those memos, anyone who ignored complaints. That includes command staff and some city council members." Reynolds rubbed his temples. "It's over," he muttered. "We're not just losing Walker, we're losing the whole house." Meanwhile, in the courthouse hallway, Vanessa Brooks spoke with reporters. "This isn't about revenge," she said calmly. "This is about justice for Marcus Owens and for every other family who was told their pain didn't matter. Today is a step toward rebuilding trust, but it's only the beginning." Reporters fired questions rapidly. "Will there be more whistleblowers? Are lawsuits coming against the city? Is this just the start of a national investigation?" Vanessa didn't flinch. "When the truth starts to come out, it doesn't stop at one person. It will go as far as it needs to." In the gallery, Kincaid sat frozen, staring at the floor. Dalton Briggs leaned toward him, whispering urgently, "You realize what's happening? They're turning you into the face of everything wrong with this department, and now the higher-ups will let you take the fall while they scramble to protect themselves." Kincaid's voice was low but bitter. "They already left me to burn. Maybe it's time I tell my side too." Briggs' eyes narrowed. "If you do that, you'll drag a lot of powerful people into the mud, and they won't forgive you." Across town, in a hidden office, the very men Briggs was referring to watched the news coverage in silence. "This is spiraling," one said, slamming his fist on the table. "Cole's testimony is just the start. If Walker flips, it leads straight to us." Another leaned forward coldly. "Then make sure Walker doesn't flip. Remind him what's at stake." That night, DOJ prosecutor Evelyn Ross gave a press briefing flanked by federal marshals. Today's testimony confirmed patterns of misconduct and deliberate cover-ups within the Atlanta Police Department, she announced. Effective immediately, federal monitors will oversee all operations of the department while a full civil rights investigation proceeds. No one is above the law. The statement sent shockwaves through the city. The crowd outside the courthouse erupted into cheers. For the first time, people felt that real accountability was possible. But in the shadows, new threats were emerging. At Walker's apartment, a knock echoed through the quiet room. He hesitated, peering through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood calmly outside, holding an unmarked envelope. Walker opened the door slightly. The man handed him the envelope without a word. Inside was a single piece of paper. Stay loyal and you survive. Talk and you disappear. Walker's hands shook. He realized the same people who once protected him would now decide his fate. Meanwhile, Henry Cole was moved to a secure federal location under heavy guard. Sitting in a quiet room, he spoke softly to Vanessa. "They won't stop," he said. "You know that, right?" Vanessa nodded. "Maybe not, but now it's bigger than them. The country is watching. They can't hide anymore." In the White House Situation Room, the president reviewed the latest updates with senior advisors. "This isn't just one department," an advisor said. Cole hinted at a culture. This could trigger nationwide investigations. The president nodded grimly. "Then let it. If we don't fix this, it'll break us from the inside out." Back in Atlanta, Sarah Owens lit a candle on her porch, looking up at the night sky. She whispered to herself, "Marcus, they're finally listening. Your voice is louder than ever." And outside the police headquarters, the protest crowd swelled to thousands. Candles flickered in the darkness, illuminating hand-painted signs. "For Marcus, for all of us." But in a private call, one of the shadowy figures who had tried to silence Cole spoke into a burner phone. "Phase 2. If they want war, we'll give them one. Because when truth pulls back the curtain, power doesn't go quietly. It fights back harder." The morning after the federal takeover announcement, Atlanta was a city divided. On one side, thousands filled the streets with hope, believing real change might finally come. On the other, whispers of resentment stirred within the ranks of those who feared what would be uncovered next. At the Atlanta Police Department, tension was palpable. Officers sat in silence as federal monitors arrived, escorted by U.S. Marshals. They began cataloging records, pulling old complaint files from dusty archives. Some officers watched nervously as boxes of evidence were wheeled out of the building. Chief Reynolds stood in his office, arms crossed tightly. He stared out the window at the growing crowd of protesters outside headquarters. "It's like a dam broke overnight," he muttered. A deputy chief entered cautiously. "Sir, the mayor wants an emergency briefing. DOJ wants a list of every officer with a history of unresolved complaints. That includes some very senior names." Reynolds exhaled, his jaw tense. "We have no choice now. Give them everything." Across town, Vanessa Brooks reviewed a growing stack of statements from families who had come forward after seeing Henry Cole testify. Mothers, fathers, siblings, all with stories eerily similar to Sarah Owens. "They're finally talking," Vanessa said quietly to Evelyn Ross, who sat across from her. "They've been silent for years, afraid nothing would change. But now they see the cracks. They see a chance." Evelyn nodded. "We'll need to vet every story carefully, but this is more than a trial now. It's becoming a national case study. If we succeed here, it could trigger reform in every major city." Meanwhile, Henry Cole sat in a secure federal safe house. Though surrounded by guards, he couldn't shake the feeling of danger. He sipped black coffee, staring blankly at the television as news anchors debated his testimony. A federal marshal entered. "Sir, we've confirmed that multiple threats have been made against you in the last 24 hours. Don't worry, we've locked down this location tight. You're safe here." Cole gave a faint, weary smile. "I've been a cop long enough to know there's no such thing as truly safe." In a quiet corner of the courthouse, Kincaid met with Dalton Briggs again. His voice was lower now, stripped of the arrogance he once carried. "They're going to hang me out to dry," Kincaid muttered. Cole blew it all open. "And you know what? They're not wrong, but I wasn't the only one. I was following the same orders everyone else followed." Briggs looked at him carefully. "If you have proof, emails, conversations, anything, you could trade it. Cooperate with the feds. They might reduce your sentence." Kincaid hesitated. "And what? End up like Cole with a target on my back?" Briggs leaned in. "You already have a target on your back. At least this way, you might walk out alive." Elsewhere in the city, Malik Turner prepared another report for his growing online audience. His new headline read, "The System Exposed, Whistleblower Sparks Federal Crackdown." His voiceover played over images of protesters outside the police HQ and courthouse. The fallout from Marcus Owens' funeral continues to grow. Henry Cole's testimony has triggered a federal investigation, exposing a network of silence that protected abusive officers for decades. But the deeper this goes, the more dangerous it becomes for those speaking the truth. As the video went viral, messages flooded in from around the country, other cities, other families, all with their own hidden stories. Malik knew this was no longer just about Atlanta. Meanwhile, in Washington, the president met with his senior advisors. "If DOJ confirms systemic corruption, we'll have to push for national reform," an advisor said. "It won't be easy. There will be pushback from unions and local governments." The president nodded slowly. "Pushback or not, this can't keep happening. If Marcus Owens gave his life for this country, the least we can do is honor his sacrifice with the truth." That evening, Sarah Owens was invited to speak at a national town hall broadcast. She stood on stage clutching the folded flag. Her voice trembled, but her words were strong. "My son believed in service. He believed in doing the right thing. And when he came home in a coffin, we were stopped on the way to his grave. I don't want another mother to feel what I felt. I want his memory to mean change." The audience gave a standing ovation. Across the nation, people lit candles in Marcus's honor. But while the world rallied for justice, the shadows were not silent. In a private meeting, the same powerful figures who had ordered the failed attempt on Cole gathered around a polished table. "The DOJ is digging deeper than we thought," one said bitterly. "They're looking at contracts, money trails, everything." Another man's voice was colder. "Then we move the pieces. Anyone who can talk must be silenced. Walker, Cole, even Kincaid. Before they drag the rest of us down." They exchanged knowing looks. And that night, in his federal safe house, Cole received an anonymous message on a secure tablet meant only for DOJ communication. "You can't hide forever. We'll find you." Cole stared at the message, his pulse quickening. He turned to the guard outside his door. "They know I'm here. They're coming." The guard tightened his grip on his weapon. "Then we'll be ready." Outside, the crowd of protesters held their candles high, unaware of the storm still gathering in the dark. Because exposing the truth doesn't end the fight, it only begins a bigger one. The following day, Atlanta was on edge. Federal agents had taken control of the police department's internal affairs office, sifting through decades of buried complaints. Each box of unearthed files was escorted out under heavy security, watched by reporters and protesters chanting for transparency. Chief Reynolds stood before a wall of cameras at a hastily called press conference. His face was drawn, his tone defensive. "We are fully cooperating with the federal investigation," he said. "The actions of one officer do not represent the values of this department. We will restore trust with our community." But the reporters weren't buying it. "Chief, how do you explain the signed memos Henry Cole provided, showing that multiple complaints were deliberately ignored?" one asked sharply. Reynolds's lips tightened. "Those documents are under review. I can't comment further." Another reporter jumped in. "Is it true that several senior officials are under federal subpoena? Are you one of them?" Reynolds didn't answer. He turned and walked away as shouted questions followed him down the hallway. Meanwhile, inside a secure federal facility, Cole prepared for another round of interviews. Vanessa sat across from him at a plain table, while Evelyn Ross reviewed a checklist of what he would present next. "You're about to name names," Evelyn said quietly. "Are you sure you're ready for the fallout?" Cole nodded. "They've taken enough from good people. It's time the country knows who really ran the cover-ups." Vanessa placed a reassuring hand on the table. "This won't be easy, but you're not alone anymore. The people are on your side." Across town, Kincaid sat in the courthouse holding cell, staring at the floor. Dalton Briggs entered, holding a folder. "Listen carefully," Briggs said. "Cole's testimony has buried you, but the feds are offering a deal. If you cooperate, if you name the higher-ups who protected you, they'll reduce your sentence. You'll still serve time, but you might walk out in a few years instead of decades." Kincaid didn't look up. "And what happens if I talk?" "They'll come after me." "You know they will." Briggs leaned closer. "They're already coming after you. Cole is under protection. You could be too. But this is your only chance." For the first time, Kincaid's cold demeanor cracked. "I was a soldier once too. I thought I was protecting my brothers in blue." but they left me here to rot. Maybe it's time they rot with me. Meanwhile, Malik Turner was live on the streets, capturing the growing movement. His new report showed nationwide protests, with crowds gathering in cities far beyond Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, all chanting Marcus Owens' East-Seaving name. This is no longer just a local story, Malik narrated. This is a national reckoning, and tomorrow, when Cole returns to the stand, the names he reveals could shake entire political offices. Back at Sarah Owens' home, she watched the live coverage in silence. Keisha sat beside her, holding her hand. They're saying Marcus's case might lead to the biggest reform bill in decades, Keisha said softly. Sarah blinked back tears. Then maybe his death won't be for nothing. Later that evening, Evelyn Ross stood in a packed DOJ briefing room, flanked by federal marshals. Tomorrow's testimony will reveal the names of officials who participated in systemic cover-ups within the Atlanta Police Department, she announced. This is not just about one city. This is about restoring integrity to law enforcement nationwide. Her words were met with a flurry of questions, but she said no more. That night, the city felt tense. Federal agents patrolled the streets near the courthouse, while protesters held a candlelight vigil in honor of Marcus Owens and every other name silenced by the system. But elsewhere, in the shadows, the powerful men who had orchestrated the cover-ups met one last time. This ends tomorrow, one said coldly. Cole cannot take the stand again. If he does, we're finished. Another man leaned back, his face half lit by the dim room. Then we stop him before sunrise. Meanwhile, at the safe house, Cole couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, knowing that his next words would unleash K-doubles. Vanessa's team had stationed guards at every entrance, but Cole knew how far the men he was about to expose would go. A federal marshal entered quietly. We're moving you to a more secure location tonight, no risks. Cole nodded, gathering the briefcase again. As they left the safe house, the night felt too quiet. The convoy of black SUVs pulled into the street. From a distance, unseen in the dark, another set of headlights flickered on. Inside one of the trailing vehicles, a man spoke into a radio. Targets on the move, confirming route. And at that exact moment, a secure phone rang in the Oval Office. The president picked it up. Sir, an aide said urgently, we have reason to believe there's another attempt to intercept Cole. Orders? The president's voice hardened. Send everything we have. He cannot be silenced, not now. Back in the convoy, Cole clutched the briefcase and whispered to himself, Marcus, give me strength. Ahead, the road narrowed and the ambush began. Because the closer the truth came to daylight, the more desperate the darkness became to extinguish it. The black SUVs carrying Henry Cole moved steadily through the dimly lit streets, their engines humming low. Federal marshals inside remained alert, eyes scanning every intersection. Cole sat in the back seat, clutching the briefcase tightly to his chest. His knuckles were white, his breathing shallow, but his resolve was unshaken. Relax, Mr. Cole, the lead marshal said. We've mapped the route. No one's getting near you tonight. But a few blocks ahead, a dark sedan idled with its headlights off. Two men sat inside, their faces shadowed. One of them spoke into a radio. Convoy confirmed. Approaching now. Stand by. As the SUVs turned onto a narrow industrial road, the first car of the convoy slowed for a red light. Suddenly, out of the darkness, a delivery truck screeched sideways, blocking the intersection completely. Go! 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 The marshal shouted. Before the drivers could react, two more vehicles sped out from alleyways, cutting off the convoy from behind. The marshals instantly drew their weapons, forming a protective wall around Cole's SUV. This is a trap, the driver muttered, shifting into reverse. Masked men stepped out of the blocking vehicles, armed with crowbars and flashlights. They moved with military precision, surrounding the convoy. Cole's heart pounded. They're here for me, he whispered. The lead marshal grabbed the radio. HQ, this is Convoy Alpha. Under coordinated attack. Request immediate backup. Static hissed on the line. From the shadows, a tall figure approached the blocked convoy slowly, his voice calm but chilling. Henry Cole, step out of the car. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Stay down, the marshal ordered, pushing Cole lower in the seat. Suddenly, one of the masked men smashed the side mirror of the lead SUV, shattering glass onto the asphalt. Another yanked at the back door handle, but the reinforced locks held firm. Inside the convoy, the driver clenched his teeth. We can't hold this spot. We're sitting ducks. The lead marshal made a split-second decision. Hit the truck, full force. The driver slammed the accelerator. The SUV lunged forward, ramming the blocking delivery truck with a deafening crash. Metal crumpled, alarms blared, and the impact jolted everyone inside. The truck shifted just enough for a narrow gap to appear. "Go! Push through!" The convoy accelerated hard, clipping the attackers' vehicles as they forced their way out. Behind them, masked men scrambled to regroup, shouting orders into radios. But as the SUVs sped through the streets, another car appeared in the rearview mirror, chasing them relentlessly. "They're still on us!" the marshal in the back shouted. Cole's hands trembled on the briefcase. "They won't stop. They can't let this come out." The driver swerved through an empty marketplace, knocking over street barriers to lose the pursuit. Finally, they burst onto a main road, where distant sirens signaled approaching backup. In a hidden command room miles away, the men who had ordered the ambush watched the failed operation unfold through a grainy security feed. "They broke through," one said, slamming his fist on the table. The older man at the head of the table stayed calm. "It doesn't matter. If we can't silence Cole, we discredit him. Tomorrow we leak his past, paint him as a liar, a bitter ex-cop seeking revenge." Meanwhile, at DOJ headquarters, Evelyn Ross received the frantic call. "They tried to intercept Cole again," the marshal reported. "We barely got him out. He's en route to the federal courthouse now under heavier guard." Evelyn's face hardened. "Then tomorrow he testifies under full federal protection. No more delays." Across the country, the attempted ambush leaked to the press. News anchors interrupted programming with breaking reports. Whistleblower Henry Cole survives coordinated attack. Federal agents confirm plot to silence testimony. The public's outrage exploded. Outside the courthouse, the protest doubled in size. Veterans locked arms with community leaders, chanting louder than ever, "Protect the truth! Protect Cole!" Sarah Owens watched the news from her living room, her grip on the folded flag tightening. "They're still trying to bury it," she whispered. Keisha stood beside her. "But they can't anymore. Too many people are watching now." Meanwhile, Kincaid sat in his holding cell, hearing the news from a guard. He smirked bitterly. "They really tried to take him out. They're desperate now." The guard gave him a knowing look. "You want to save yourself? Now's your time to talk. Cole might not be the only one exposing them." Late that night, as Cole finally reached the federal courthouse safehouse, he stepped out of the SUV, shaken but alive. Vanessa met him at the entrance. "They failed," she said quietly. "You made it." Cole nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow, I'll tell them everything." And in the shadows, the last call of the night was made from the men who orchestrated it all. Tomorrow he talks. Phase 2 begins. If we can't stop the testimony, we drown it in noise. Across the city, the candles outside the courthouse kept burning. The people were ready for the truth, because once the truth survives the dark, it becomes unstoppable. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by an even larger crowd. Veterans in crisp uniforms stood at the front lines of the protest, saluting as Sarah Owens arrived. Behind her, families held framed photos of loved ones whose cases had never made the news. Candles flickered in the morning breeze, a silent promise that the truth wouldn't be buried this time. Inside the courthouse, federal marshals secured every hallway. Metal detectors, locked checkpoints, and plainclothes agents blended into the crowd. They weren't taking any chances. In a private room, Henry Cole sat with Vanessa Brooks and Evelyn Ross. He looked tired but determined, the briefcase resting on the table before him. "Today you tell them everything," Vanessa said quietly. "Once it's on the record, it can't be erased." Cole nodded slowly. "I've carried this for too long. Time to put it down." Outside the courtroom, Kincaid was escorted in. His face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow. Dalton Briggs walked beside him, whispering urgently, "Remember, the plea deal is still on the table. If you confirm what Cole says, you could save yourself. If you stay silent, you're done." Kincaid didn't answer. But deep inside, he knew Briggs was right. When Judge Harriet Monroe entered, the room went silent. Her gavel struck once. This session will hear further testimony regarding systemic misconduct within the Atlanta Police Department. The witness, Henry Cole, will take the stand. Cole walked slowly to the witness stand. The room was packed. Reporters, lawyers, activists, even federal observers from Washington. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and took his seat. Monique Harris stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, yesterday you testified that Sergeant Marcus Owens' funeral was disrupted as a result of a long-standing culture of abuse within the Atlanta Police Department. Today, we ask you to name those who protected this culture. Are you prepared to do that? Cole took a deep breath. Yes. The courtroom leaned in. These documents, Cole said, lifting a folder, show direct orders from high-ranking commanders instructing officers to close misconduct complaints without proper investigation. They were told to label them as training issues or insufficient evidence, and these orders weren't random. They were part of a deliberate strategy to protect certain officers. On the screen behind him, emails appeared with subject lines like "handle quietly" and "do not escalate." Political sensitivity. Cole's voice grew firmer. The names on these memos include Deputy Chief Simmons, Commander Ellis, and yes, Chief Reynolds himself. They all signed off on burying cases like Walker's. Gasps filled the room. And it goes beyond the department, Cole continued. Some of these directives came from city officials who didn't want bad press. Councilman Hayes approved budget bonuses for units that kept complaint numbers down. The union president threatened officers who spoke out. This wasn't a few bad apples. It was an entire orchard being poisoned from the top. The jury exchanged stunned looks. Reporters furiously scribbled notes. Briggs jumped up. "Objection! This is hearsay and character assassination." Judge Monroe banged her gavel. "Overruled. The evidence speaks for itself." Cole leaned closer to the microphone. "I stayed silent because I thought I couldn't fight it. But after Marcus Owens' funeral was stopped, after his mother was humiliated, I couldn't look away anymore. He fought for this country. He deserved better. And so did every person we failed." In the gallery, Sarah Owens wiped her eyes. Malik Turner, seated nearby, live-streamed the entire moment to millions. Outside the courthouse, the crowd watching the giant screen erupted. "Name them all!" "No more cover-ups!" Cole placed the final document on the table. This memo lists every unresolved complaint tied to officers currently serving. It's over 200 pages long. It's time the public sees it. Evelyn Ross stood. "Your Honor, the Department of Justice moves to enter these documents into the official federal investigation." Judge Monroe nodded. "So ordered." These records are now public evidence. The courtroom buzzed with shock. On live TV, anchors interrupted broadcasts. Explosive testimony reveals city officials and police leadership involved in systemic cover-ups. Back in Washington, the president watched the feed and turned to his advisor. "Draft the statement. We're calling for a nationwide review of similar departments. This isn't stopping at Atlanta." Meanwhile, in the defense table, Kincaid looked up slowly. His voice was low but audible. "I can back that up," he said suddenly, cutting through the noise. Everyone turned. Kincaid stood, facing the judge. "I have proof too. Emails, conversations. They told us how to close cases, how to target certain neighborhoods. I was part of it, and I'm done being their shield." Briggs froze. "Don't do this." But Kincaid didn't stop. "They left me here to take the fall. I won't be their scapegoat. If Cole is telling the truth, I'll confirm it all." The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, reporters rushing out to broadcast the breaking twist. Outside, the protesters heard the news over speakers and roared louder than ever. And in a private office across the city, the men who once controlled the silence watched the live stream with pale faces. "They're flipping," one muttered. The older man stood slowly. "Then we burn everything. Documents, records, whatever's left. We're not going down alone." But now it was too late. The truth was no longer contained. Inside the courtroom, Cole and Kincaid locked eyes for a brief, silent moment. For the first time, both knew the walls were coming down. Because when the shield of silence cracks, it doesn't break slowly. It shatters all at once. The courtroom buzzed with chaos after Kincaid's sudden declaration. Reporters sprinted for the exits, phones to their ears, shouting updates into live broadcasts. The jury looked stunned. Judge Monroe banged her gavel repeatedly, her voice cutting through the uproar. "Order! This court will have order!" Kincaid, still standing, gripped the defense table with white knuckles. His voice shook, but he didn't back down. "They told me to profile certain neighborhoods. They told me to make stops even when there was no cause, because it kept the numbers up. They told me if I had complaints, the department would handle it quietly." Dalton Briggs grabbed his arm. "Sit down, Greg. Don't say another word without counsel." Kincaid yanked his arm free. "No, I'm done protecting them. I was wrong. I see that now. Marcus Owens was a soldier who deserved honor, not humiliation, and they're trying to make me the villain, while the people who gave the orders keep their hands clean." Gasps swept through the gallery. Sarah Owens stared at him, disbelief and grief mingling on her face. Cole sat silently, watching the very system that once silenced him unravel in real time. Evelyn Ross from the DOJ rose. Your Honor, the department requests an immediate recess to formally debrief this witness. His testimony supports the federal investigation already underway. Judge Monroe nodded sharply. Granted. We will recess for 1 hour. Mr. Kincaid, you are now under direct federal protection pending further questioning. As the gavel struck, the courtroom erupted again. Outside, the news spread instantly. Malik Turner's livestream caught the moment word for word. Breaking. Officer Kincaid flips in court, confirms cover-ups, illegal quotas, and targeted policing orders. More names expected. The crowd outside the courthouse roared with energy. Veterans held their flags higher, chanting, "Justice for Marcus," while families embraced, tears streaming as they felt vindicated for years of ignored complaints. Back in the mayor's office, phones rang non-stop. Staffers scrambled with urgent calls from city officials resigning one by one. The council's in panic, an aide told the mayor. Reynolds and 2 deputy chiefs just cleared their offices. The union president is nowhere to be found. The mayor stared blankly at the reports. It's over. The whole department leadership is collapsing. Meanwhile, in a hidden office across the city, the powerful men behind the cover-ups gathered again. Their once confident demeanor was gone. He turned on us, one said bitterly, slamming his fist on the table. The older man at the head of the table was eerily calm. We expected Cole to talk. We didn't expect Walker. That's the crack that breaks the dam. So what now? Another asked, voice trembling. The older man leaned back. Now? We prepare to run. But before we go, we make sure nothing else ties back to us. Burn the files, move the money. Across town, Chief Reynolds sat alone in his office. The blinds were drawn, the room silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. He looked at the badge on his desk, the same badge he once believed stood for justice. Now it felt like an anchor dragging him under. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number read, "They're coming for you next. Get out while you can." Reynolds stared at it, realizing there was nowhere left to run. Back in the secure courthouse room, Cole faced Kincaid for the first time since the funeral. "You're late," Cole said quietly. Kincaid looked at him with hollow eyes. "I know, I was a coward, but if my words can bring them down, then I'll talk." Vanessa Brooks leaned forward. "Then you both testify tomorrow, together. Once it's public, they can't silence either of you." Evelyn Ross nodded. "This is bigger than Atlanta now. The DOJ will expand the investigation statewide, and if the president approves, it could go national." Meanwhile, Malik Turner's report hit every major platform, showing footage of Cole and Kincaid's testimonies side by side. Across the nation, cities erupted in solidarity protests. In New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, thousands marched with signs reading, "Marcus Owens, never again." At Sarah Owens' home, she watched the protests on TV. Keisha sat beside her, holding her hand. "You see?" Keisha whispered. "He's changing things even now." Sarah nodded slowly. Marcus wanted to make the world better. Maybe this is his way. That evening, the president appeared live on national television. "What we have witnessed in Atlanta is unacceptable," he said, his voice steady, "but it is not isolated. We will not allow the sacrifice of men and women like Sergeant Marcus Owens to be dishonored. Effective immediately, I am authorizing a nationwide review of law enforcement practices. This is the beginning of true reform." Cheers erupted in cities across the country. But in a private call, the last remnants of the shadowy network planned their final move. If they want war, we'll give them chaos, leak misinformation, discredit the witnesses, make the public doubt everything before the next hearing. The battle wasn't over, it was just changing shape. Back in the courthouse, Cole and Kincaid prepared for the next day, knowing that the truth was now out of the cage, but the fight for it had only just begun. Because when a system falls, it doesn't go quietly. It tries to drag everything down with it. The morning after the president's national address, the city was alive with an uneasy mix of hope and tension. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse hours before the next session, chanting Marcus Owens' name and holding signs demanding justice. For the first time in years, people felt change might actually be within reach. But as the sun rose, a new wave of headlines began to spread, this time from suspicious sources. Breaking: whistleblower Henry Cole, under investigation for misconduct during his career. Anonymous leaks question Cole's credibility, claim he has personal vendetta. On social media, bots and fake accounts flooded comment sections, sowing doubt. Why trust a retired cop who never spoke up before? One post read, "Looks like someone's chasing fame." Inside the DOJ command room, Evelyn Ross slammed a file onto the table. "They're moving fast. Discrediting Cole is their first play. We knew this was coming." Vanessa Brooks was already scanning the leaks. "These are doctored reports. Half of this never happened. We need to respond immediately before the public starts believing it." Across town, Henry Cole sat in his secure safe house, watching the smear campaign unfold on the news. His hands clenched the armrests of his chair. "They're tearing me apart," he muttered. "They're making it look like I'm the problem." A federal marshal reassured him. "We've seen this before. Stay calm. Once you testify again today, the truth will drown out their lies." Meanwhile, in his cell, Kincaid also saw the headlines on a muted TV. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "They'll destroy him to save themselves," he said quietly to Briggs. Briggs looked uneasy. "They're desperate, but your testimony today can back Cole up. Together, you're harder to discredit." Kincaid smirked faintly. "Guess it's too late for me to care what they think." Back at the courthouse, Sarah Owens arrived with Keisha, flanked by veterans who had sworn to protect her. She ignored the cameras, keeping her focus on the flag in her hands. "They'll try to twist everything," Keisha whispered. Sarah nodded. "But the truth is bigger than their lies now." Inside the courtroom, federal marshals lined the walls. Judge Monroe called the session to order. The gallery was packed tighter than ever, with journalists scribbling furiously and live feeds streaming to millions. Monique Harris rose. "The prosecution calls Henry Cole back to the stand." Cole walked to the stand slowly but confidently. The crowd hushed. "Mr. Cole," Monique began, "are you aware of recent claims questioning your credibility?" "Yes," Cole said, his voice steady. "And I'll say this. Those claims are false. They're part of a desperate attempt to silence the truth I've already shared. The documents I provided are real. The names are real. And the system they're trying to protect is real." He held up another folder. "And today, I brought more." Murmurs rippled through the room. "These," Cole continued, "are financial records showing payments funneled through shell accounts to officers and officials who kept quiet. This wasn't just about protecting reputations. It was about money. Contracts, private deals, political favors, all tied to the same network that let Walker and others operate without consequences." The screen behind him displayed spreadsheets with coded transactions and linked names, some already known, others new. Councilman Hayes received thousands in community development funds from a private security firm connected to the department. Union President Dalton received bonuses tied directly to lowered complaint rates. And Chief Reynolds? He personally signed off on these payouts. The courtroom erupted. Dalton Briggs stood, trying to cut in. "Objection! This is beyond the scope." Judge Monroe's gavel came down. "Overruled. The witness will continue." Cole looked at the jury. "I stayed silent because I was scared, but Marcus Owens didn't die for me to stay scared. His funeral was stopped because someone like Walker thought he could act with impunity. And he thought that because the system taught him he could. That ends today." Applause broke out from the gallery before Judge Monroe restored order. But before the room could settle, Kincaid stood at the defense table. His voice carried clearly. "I can confirm everything Cole said," he announced, "and I can add more. I was part of the meetings. I heard the orders. I saw the money change hands. They're trying to bury him because he's telling the truth." Now the courtroom was chaos. Reporters rushed out to blast the news. Cameras caught Sarah Owens's quiet tears as she finally felt the weight of justice turning in her favor. Outside Buchtatsin, the crowd watching on big screens erupted into cheers. "We believe you! We believe you!" Meanwhile, in a shadowed office, the men behind the disinformation campaign watched the broadcast in fury. "Cole survived the smear," one said, "and now Walker's joining him. We're losing control of the narrative." The older man's face darkened. "Then we change the game. If they want a war of truth, we'll give them a storm of lies. Leak more, flood the media, make it impossible for the public to know what's real." But even as they plotted, Evelyn Ross stepped outside the courthouse to a bank of microphones. "We are expanding this investigation statewide," she announced, "and based on today's testimony, federal indictments will be issued not just for officers, but for public officials and anyone who profited from this corruption. This is only the beginning." Cheers erupted outside. The movement was no longer just local, and in the Oval Office, the president received the update and said quietly, "Prepare the reform package. After this, the whole country will demand it." Back in the courtroom, Cole and Kincaid sat silently, knowing they'd just pulled the curtain back even further. Because when lies flood the world, the truth only burns brighter. By the next morning, Atlanta felt like it was holding its breath. News channels played endless loops of Henry Cole's damning testimony and Kincaid's shocking decision to back him up. Commentators spoke in urgent tones about the coming fallout. Federal indictments could be filed as early as today. This is the biggest law enforcement scandal in the state's history. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had transformed into a sea of signs and candles. Veterans in full-dress uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with mothers holding photos of lost sons and daughters. Chants filled the air. "For Marcus, for all of us." Inside the DOJ command room, Evelyn Ross reviewed a fresh stack of evidence. "We have enough," she told her team. "The paper trail Cole and Kincaid gave us matches the financial records. This isn't just negligence, it's organized corruption." Vanessa Brooks stood beside her. "What happens first?" "Today we announce federal indictments for Chief Reynolds, Deputy Chief Simmons, Commander Ellis, and Councilman Hayes," Evelyn said. "But we're not stopping there. There are more names coming." Meanwhile, in his office, Chief Reynolds sat staring at his phone, pale and silent. His lawyer was on speaker. "They have you, John. The documents Cole handed over are solid. You can't spin this. My advice? Resign before they drag you out in handcuffs." Reynolds swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" "Then they'll make an example of you," the lawyer replied. Across town, in a dim cafe, the shadowy figures who had orchestrated the smear campaign and the failed ambush met in hushed tones. "They're indicting officials today," one said angrily. "If Reynolds flips, he takes us all down." The older man nodded slowly. "Then make sure Reynolds stays quiet, and prepare an exit plan. Once this goes national, no one's safe." Back at the courthouse, Sarah Owens arrived quietly, escorted by Colonel Parker. Cameras flashed, but she kept her gaze forward. "They're saying today could be the start of real justice," Parker said softly. Sarah held the folded flag tighter. "Justice won't bring Marcus back, but if it saves someone else's son, it's worth it." Inside, Judge Monroe reconvened the hearing. The gallery was packed with reporters, federal agents, and members of the public. Evelyn Ross stood at the front, holding a thick folder. "Your Honor," Evelyn began, her voice calm but strong, "based on the testimony provided by Henry Cole and Greg Kincaid, as well as supporting financial and communication records, the Department of Justice is formally filing federal indictments against the following individuals for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations." She opened the folder. Chief John Reynolds, Deputy Chief Linda Simmons, Commander Paul Ellis, Councilman Richard Hayes, Union President William Dalton. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Some reporters bolted for the exits to break the news. These individuals participated in systemic cover-ups of police misconduct, including but not limited to falsifying records, silencing complaints, and enabling unlawful targeting of citizens, Evelyn continued. "They will be taken into federal custody immediately." As she spoke, federal marshals entered the police headquarters across town. Cameras caught the moment Reynolds was escorted out of his office in handcuffs, his face ashen. Deputy Chief Simmons followed minutes later, her head bowed as marshals led her into a waiting vehicle. On live television, the indictment sparked a wave of reactions. In cities nationwide, people gathered in spontaneous marches. Malik Turner streamed the breaking moment live from the courthouse steps. "It's happening," he told his viewers. "For the first time, the people at the top are facing consequences. This is history in the making." Back in Washington, the president's team prepared another statement. "This isn't just about punishing the guilty," the president said in a draft. "It's about rebuilding trust. If we want to honor Sergeant Marcus Owens, we must honor the values he fought for: justice, accountability, and dignity." Meanwhile, in a federal safehouse, Cole watched the news coverage silently. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a small, tired smile. Kincaid, in his holding cell, saw the footage on a small TV. He exhaled deeply, knowing there was no turning back now. But even as the city celebrated the arrests, the shadowy figures who remained free made their next move. "They've taken the first layer," the older man said, "but they don't know the whole network. We still have leverage. If they dig deeper, we release everything, every file, every name. Make it so big they can't contain it." Another man frowned. That's chaos. The older one smirked. Exactly. If we go down, we take the whole system with us. Back outside the courthouse, Sarah Owens stood quietly as the crowd cheered around her. Colonel Parker leaned in. This is only the beginning, he said. Sarah nodded. Then let's make sure it doesn't end where it started. The cameras kept rolling, capturing a city and a nation on the brink of change. Because when the first domino falls, the entire structure begins to crumble. The city erupted in celebration after the arrests. People poured into the streets, chanting Marcus Owens' name and waving flags. For a brief moment, it felt like justice was finally winning. But as night fell, a darker current began to flow beneath the surface. Around midnight, breaking news alerts hit every phone screen. Confidential DOJ documents leaked, claims of evidence tampering. Anonymous sources allege Henry Cole some fabricated key files. Confusion spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with conflicting posts, some defending Cole, others accusing him of being a fraud. Bot accounts amplified the chaos, flooding timelines with doctored emails and fake witness statements. Malik Turner sat in his small studio, staring at the flood of misinformation. They're trying to bury it in noise, he said to his camera during a live broadcast. Don't fall for it, stay focused. The truth doesn't change because they scream louder. Meanwhile, in the federal safehouse, Cole paced the room as agents monitored the digital assault. They're dragging me through the mud, he muttered. They're saying I made it all up. Vanessa Brooks checked her tablet, scanning the fake leaks. This was planned. They knew they'd lose in court, so they're trying to win in the media. But we have verified copies of everything you provided. Tomorrow, we show the originals in front of the judge. Cole sank into a chair. I knew they'd fight back, but I didn't think it would feel like this. It's like they're rewriting history in real time. At the same time, Kincaid sat in his cell, watching the smear campaign unfold on the small TV bolted to the wall. He shook his head. They're throwing everything they've got left. The guard outside his cell leaned in. If you're smart, you'll double down in court tomorrow. If Cole falls, you fall with him. Kincaid stared at the blank ceiling. I'm in this now, no turning back. Across town, the remaining members of the shadowy network met in their private club. The older man at the head of the table smiled faintly as he read the headlines. You see, he said calmly, the public doesn't know what's real anymore. By the time they sort it out, we'll be long gone. Another man asked nervously, what about Reynolds? Hayes? They're already talking. The older man's gaze sharpened. Then we make sure the ones still free stay free. The rest are expendable. Meanwhile, at DOJ headquarters, Evelyn Ross prepared the next day's strategy. She met with federal analysts who were dissecting the leaks. These documents are fake, one analyst confirmed. We can trace the digital fingerprints back to overseas servers. It's deliberate disinformation. Evelyn nodded grimly. Then tomorrow we go on the record. We show the originals. We show the chain of custody. We cut through their noise. Vanessa Brooks, standing beside her, added, and we remind the public why this started in the first place. Marcus Owens deserves more than to have his memory turned into a battlefield. Outside the courthouse that night, protesters stayed, holding vigil despite the smear campaign. Veterans stood silently with candles, refusing to move. A large banner read, Truth doesn't die. Back at Sarah Owens' home, she sat watching the chaotic news cycle. Keisha brought her tea, trying to offer comfort. They can twist papers, Sarah whispered, but they can't twist what happened to my son. The whole world saw it. They saw how he was treated. Keisha squeezed her hand. Tomorrow they'll see the rest. As dawn approached, the courthouse was already surrounded by crowds. Federal agents doubled the perimeter, anticipating more attempts to disrupt the proceedings. Inside a private briefing room, Evelyn addressed Cole and Kincaid directly. Today is it, she said. They'll throw every distraction at the public. But once you testify again, once we present the untouched files, there will be no more questions. After this, the indictments become convictions. Cole nodded, gripping the briefcase that held the final set of documents. Let's finish this. Kincaid's expression was grim but determined. I've got nothing left to lose. Let's burn it all down. Meanwhile, in a hidden office, the older man from the network made his final call. If we can't win in court, we win in the streets. Stir the unrest. Make it look like chaos. If they want justice, make them fear it. That morning, as the sun rose over Atlanta, the city felt like a powder keg. Hope on one side, fear on the other. Inside the courthouse, Judge Monroe prepared for the most explosive day yet. Outside, the chants grew louder, drowning out the noise of the smear campaign. And at the White House, the president watched the live feed with a steely gaze. "This is it," he said to his aide. "After today, there's no going back. One way or another, the system will change." The cameras turned to the courthouse doors as Cole and Kincaid walked in under heavy guard. Because when the truth is cornered, it fights its way out, or it takes everything down with it. The sun rose over Atlanta with a tense electric quiet. Crowds filled the courthouse plaza, their chants echoing off the stone walls. Veterans stood in a solemn line at the front, saluting silently as Sarah Owens arrived. She clutched the folded flag of her son and looked up at the courthouse doors with steady resolve. Inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Federal marshals escorted Henry Cole and Greg Kincaid into the courtroom. Reporters filled every seat, cameras capturing every movement. The world was watching. Judge Harriet Monroe entered, her gavel striking the bench. "This session is now in order." DOJ prosecutor Evelyn Ross stood, holding the final set of documents. "Your Honor, today we present the unaltered, authenticated evidence that confirms systemic misconduct and corruption. The time for lies is over." She turned toward Cole. "Mr. Cole, please continue your testimony." Cole rose from his seat, the briefcase in his hand. His voice was steady, but the weight of the moment was clear in his eyes. "These files are the originals. They were backed up on secure servers long before this trial began. The documents the opposition leaked last night were falsified. Here is the proof that they've tried to deceive the public once again." He handed the folder to the clerk. On the large courtroom screen, side-by-side images appeared. The forged documents and the originals, complete with time-stamped records and verified signatures. Cole pointed at the originals. "These show the money trails, the orders to suppress complaints, and the chain of command that gave Walker the confidence to do what he did. This isn't speculation. It's the truth they wanted buried." The jury leaned forward, eyes fixed on the evidence. Kincaid stood next, his voice low but firm. "I was part of it. I was told who to target, which cases to close, and how to make it look legitimate. I'm not proud of it. But if telling the truth now means this stops happening, then I'll take whatever punishment comes my way." Judge Monroe nodded solemnly. "This testimony will be entered into the record and forwarded to federal authorities for immediate action." Outside the courthouse, Malik Turner streamed live to millions. There you have it, clear evidence, confirmed by 2 witnesses who were inside the system. The lies they tried to spread are falling apart in real time. The crowd erupted in cheers as the news spread. "Justice for Marcus! Truth wins!" Inside the Atlanta Police Department, federal marshals moved swiftly. More arrests were made. Deputy Chief Simmons, Union President Dalton, and several other high-ranking officials were led out in handcuffs. Live footage captured every moment, ensuring no one could quietly slip away. Back at City Hall, Councilman Hayes was cornered by reporters as he tried to leave through a back door. "The DOJ has evidence you accepted bribes to cover up complaints. Do you deny it?" they shouted. Hayes offered no answer, his face pale, before being escorted into a federal car. Meanwhile, the last remnants of the shadowy network watched their empire crumble on television screens. "It's over," one whispered. The older man in the group stared silently for a long moment, then finally said, "No. It's over for them, but we'll rebuild. We always do." And with that, he walked out, disappearing into the shadows. By afternoon, Judge Monroe reconvened for her final statement. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of systemic misconduct. The individuals named will face trial under federal charges, and this court recommends the immediate restructuring of the Atlanta Police Department under federal oversight." Gasps and cheers filled the room. Sarah Owens covered her mouth, tears streaming as she clutched the folded flag tighter. Colonel Parker put a hand on her shoulder. "Marcus is watching. He knows you never stopped fighting for him." Later that evening, the president addressed the nation live from the Oval Office. "Today, the truth prevailed," he said. "Sergeant Marcus Owens gave his life for this country, and in death, his story has sparked a movement for justice. We will honor him and every family like his by passing comprehensive police reform and ensuring accountability nationwide. This is not the end. It is the beginning of change." In cities across the country, people poured into the streets, not in protest, but in solidarity. Candlelight vigils turned into marches of hope. Veterans, families, and communities stood together, holding signs that read, "For Marcus, for justice, for all." At the cemetery, Sarah returned quietly with Keisha and Malik. She placed the folded flag gently on Marcus's headstone and whispered, "Your fight wasn't in vain. You changed more than you'll ever know." Malik filmed the moment for the final part of his documentary. From a single roadside injustice to a nationwide reckoning, Marcus Owens' name will never be forgotten, he narrated softly. Cole and Kincaid, now both in protective custody, watched the news coverage of the reforms being announced. Cole exhaled slowly. "It's finally out. It's done." Kincaid nodded quietly. "It's never really done, but at least it's no longer hidden." And as the city began to heal, a mural of Marcus Owens appeared on the courthouse wall, painted by local artists overnight. Beneath his portrait were the words, "Truth doesn't die," because one soldier's stolen dignity lit a fire that no amount of darkness could extinguish.